I used to use woke as a pejorative, an insult. I used to use woke as a kind of an insult to cover all the silly stuff that you see online, the cringy kind of like James Bond should be a woman, and you'd be like, "What does that mean? James Bond should be a woman?" And then they'd be like, "I don't know." And be like, "Do you mean Scarlett Johansson should play a man named James Bond?" I don't think she's allowed to do that anymore. Those kind of conversations. That was woke to me. And then being conscious was being something separate. But Republicans they stole that from us. They stole that fun from us. Like they ruined Rage Against the Machine. Remember when Rage Against the Machine used to be cool? You don't? Okay. Well, then that was just me. Okay, well, anyways, when the right says woke, they mean environmentally conscious, class conscious. So guess what? Now I'm woke. And when Bill Maher and Sean Penn say woke, they mean transgender people.
It was a sanity keeper to the degree I could keep sanity. It was you. It was Dave Chappelle. It was a handful of others who, Bill Burr. Where you sat there and you say, I'm not even in a world where I have to agree or disagree. I just have to see authenticity.
Well, the three of us that you mentioned there, we're all people who call out the woke a lot.
Yeah, and then when we call you out, you run away. And by the way, the only thing you would have in common, if you actually had that in common, unfortunately, Bill Burr's pretty woke. Dave Chappelle used to be woke back before he became a slam poet for bigots instead of a comedian. Now he tells it like it ain't instead of telling jokes. Here's the thing, though. Those two were funny. And Bill Maher was never funny. Bill Maher was always a hacky Johnny Carson knockoff, except Johnny Carson used to bomb on The Tonight Show. In fact, he used to take great delight in bombing. He used to grab the boom mic and lower it and tap on it and say, "Is this thing on?" and get a laugh from the rear end. Bill Maher is too much of a narcissist to bomb. That's why he's not a real comic. A real comic knows how to bomb. And part of a real comic enjoys bombing. Bill Maher will throw a stink bomb right into a crowd and then yell at them for holding their noses. He'll say something like, "What is it, too soon?" And then everyone's like, "Too soon? You're telling weed jokes in 2023, dude. You just suck. You're not too edgy, dude.
So I feel like that is a little bit of a contradiction in you. I feel like you instinctively want to go toward that direction because, you have that tingling feeling in your balls for any sort of thing that's says there's social justice. But at some point, that movement veered into authoritarianism. Well, yeah, and that's why
woke is authoritarianism. Keep this in mind, folks. Listen to the contradiction. And remember the old fascist trope. Our enemy is both weak and strong.
The word woke, which originally was fine, alert to injustice, I'm down, always have been. But it became an eye roll. Because it morphed into...
So it's an eye roll, or is it authoritarianism? Because when you think of something like Pinochet kidnapping and torturing dissidents, nobody ever rolls their eyes and goes, "Well, that's a thing now." Or, "That is so cringe." But it's the idea, and this is the thing of why this happens. Our enemy is both weak and strong. This is why Bill Maher does this. Because on one hand, It's something annoying that he could laugh at when he sees something annoying that he can laugh at, like the James Bond is a woman thing. He could sit there and say, well, it's something that he can attack easily. But it's not that important. Annoying people, those mildly eye-rolling, annoying people. He can't really attack that. I mean, he can't justify, rationalize attacking that on a regular basis because it's a political show he does, in essence. And there are more important things to talk about. But he can't justify covering it that much, so it has to be authoritarianism. You need to justify the scapegoat that you're using.
I got news for the woke.
Yeah.
You can't find
The word woke, which originally was
Real quick.
fine, alert to
Real quick.
injustice, I'm down.
Real
Always have
quick.
been. But
Before Sean Penn goes into his little monologue, before Sean Penn goes into his monologue, every time I look and I hear Sean Penn, I think I Am Sam was really not that much of a stretch for him.
For the woke.
He's got news for the woke.
You can't find that thought when you're 150 meters from the Russians. When you're seeing the devastation and the vaporization of human beings.
Now I owe you a blowjob.
You are not going to remember all the pronouns.
So that...
I gotta play this again. That's so bad.
50 meters from the Russians.
became an eye roll. Because
Look, I
it
got
morphed
I
into
got news
something...
for the woke.
Yeah.
You can't find that thought when you're 150 meters from the Russians. When you're seeing the devastation and the vaporization of human beings.
Now I owe you a blowjob.
You are not going to remember all the pronouns.
So that...
Yeah, thanks for the news flash, Walter Cronkite. I got news for you, Sean Penn. Pronouns actually do kind of matter in Russia. Trans people are not popular over there. Pronouns do kind of matter in the Ukraine when you're trying to get across the border. You know, transgender people can't even drive cars in Russia. I got news for you, Walter Cronkite. Ukraine, what's going on in the Ukraine doesn't matter to the family, or is completely irrelevant to the family of that girl in England, that got stabbed to death. Your little hobby is completely irrelevant to the massive amounts of legislation that's going on across the United States. This is the Hollywood narcissism of a douchebag like Sean Penn, where his thing is this whole I'm really kind of into the Ukraine right now. So your pronoun thing is kind of like doesn't really matter to me, therefore it shouldn't matter to you. The fuck does Russia have to do with what we're talking about, dickhead? You know, there's a journalist named Sarah Cirillo, who was over here in Nevada, who went undercover as a Republican operative and busted some corruption and some Proud Boy connections, some essentially some fascist coup plotters who were involved in the local Republican politics here in Nevada. Because Nevada is an alt-right haven, especially the comedy scene. But we'll talk about that today. Sarah Cirillo, after she got done as an undercover Republican operative, went to Ukraine to cover trans issues there because in spite of what Sean Penn claims, there are transgender issues over in Ukraine. And then decided to quit journalism and become a full-time medic over there. She's involved for real. She's not doing photo ops like what he did in Hurricane Katrina when Sean Penn was walking around patrolling New Orleans with a shotgun, which he did not need because he's a movie star who had police protection. You know, the real problem in New Orleans were cops were roaming around murdering people. They weren't murdering movie stars. At least not ones that look like him. They were murdering victims of that hurricane. But he decided to bring along his photographer for a photo op. He literally brought a photographer to Hurricane Katrina to take photos of him being a hero. And one of those photos was him with a shotgun, sending a clear message to the rest of the world that these victims are not in fact victims, but these are dangerous people that you need to protect yourselves from. That's called bad messaging, dude. And his latest photo op was to give his Oscar to Zelensky. Like, what's he supposed to pawn it? Oh, what is this? Is this from Mystic River or this is from Milk? It does not matter. They are both piece of shit. And speaking of Milk, you certainly didn't have a problem with the woke left when you were accepting that Oscar for playing Harvey Milk. Did you complain about it then when you were giving your speech? When you were playing a civil rights icon? Nope. What an idiot. And by the way, what a horrible performance. Oh my God. He played Harvey Milk like a walking stereotype. Harvey Milk was a suit and tie guy from New York. He was just a regular, everyday dude. His name is Harvey Milk, not Harvey Firestein. But Sean Penn played him like a bigot's idea of what a gay person is. And they gave him an Oscar. And he's like, to these days, I wouldn't even be allowed to play that role. Well, unfortunately, these days, yeah, you would be allowed to play that role. And second of all, you never should have been allowed to play that role in the first place. They should have gave it to that guy that played Edward Murrow. David Strahan, whatever his name is. That was the guy that should have played Harvey Milk, dude. Anyways, Chris Penn is better than Sean Penn. I think we can all agree on this. So I'm going to name a few cool Chris Penn movies. Chris Penn is better than Sean Penn. You all know Sean Penn. You all know Chris Penn as Nice Guy Eddie in Reservoir Dogs. Y'all probably know Chris Penn from Footloose. He was the guy who Kevin Bacon taught how to dance. It was like Chris Penn's own version of Milk. He also did the unofficial sequel. Here's my 3 favorite Chris Penn movies. Number 1 would be in no particular order. 1 would be an unofficial sequel to Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It's a typical tits and ass teen comedy, but it's really, really good. It's got Chris Penn and Eric Stoltz in it. Rick Moranis is in it. Leah Thompson. And it's about these high school kids who get their own apartment, which doesn't even make sense because it's not even legal. He has to sign a lease and stuff. They never really explain that part. But nevertheless, it's a great movie. It's called The Wildlife. Third one is the Robert Altman masterpiece based on Raymond Carver's short stories, Shortcuts. Out of a huge ensemble of actors, Julianne Moore, Matthew Modine, Fred Ward, Huey Lewis, Buck Henry, Tom Waits, Lily Tomlin, Jennifer Jason Leigh. Then there's Chris Penn. And Chris Penn gives this shocking intensity that you never see coming. Completely out of the blue. The movie's a crazy movie. Then there's The Funeral, another masterpiece by Abel Ferrara, in which Chris Penn is essentially the heart of it. I don't really have an ending for this. But listen, let me tell you something, Sean Penn. You don't want to run into me in a dark alley. Because if you ran into me in a dark alley, I would be like, why is this alley so dark? Why can't they turn the lights on in this alley? Let's get out of this dark alley. And it would be really annoying and would ruin your dark alley experience.